퇴근한 엄마가 부랴부랴 아들을 부릅니다.
안녕하세요.
아까 왜 전화 안 받았냐?
나 못 봤어.
그때가 11시 몇 분이었는데 왜?
아, 그냥 못 봤어. 엄마 평소 같으면 그래 알았어 하고 들어갔는데 또 카메라 있으니까 끝까지 한번 해보려고 그러네.
아유 진짜 네가 달라지려면 컴퓨터를 안 해야 되는 건 알아?
이게 내 생활이잖아. 나 원래 이렇게밖에 생활 안 하잖아.
그러니까 우리가 왜 했는데
내가 좀
컴퓨터를
나아지게
그만하자.
아들의 반발에 마음을 다잡은 엄마는 결국 인터넷 공유기를 뽑아버렸습니다. 늘 받아주기만 하던 엄마가 인터넷을 끊어버린 건 처음입니다. 참고 참다 터져버린 엄마의 결단에 아들은 화가 났습니다.
지금 인터넷 끊었지?
아빠도 얘기해.
아, 그럼 나도 촬영 기억자되고 한다. 나 그럼 얘기 절대 안 해. 오자마자 이 신경질적인 거에 휩쓸려가지고 바로 끊었잖아요. 저는 지금 게임 못하자는 거 그 자체도 문제인데 정규팀이 있고 게임 안에서 나름대로 사람들이 있고 이 사람들이랑 약속을 하고 정리를 해야 되는데 이보세요. 안 해. 또 안 해. 아유. 엄마가 아빠고 나한테 한 번이라도 자기 주장 그렇게 내세워 본 적 있어? 그리고 내가 지금 엄마한테 많이 져줬지. 근데 엄마는 지금 오자마자 자기 화에 휩쓸려가지고 끊었잖아. 그거 왜 인정을 못해? 자기 화에 휩쓸려서 껐잖아. 인터넷 인정을 해 안 해? 자기 화에 휩쓸려서 껐잖아. 인정을 해 안 해? 자기 화에 휩쓸려서 껐잖아. 인정을 해 안 해? 화에 휩쓸려서 껐잖아. 인정을 해 안 해?
이기려고 하는 게 아니라고.
인정을 해 안 해? 엄마 자기 화에 휩쓸려서 지금 내 인터넷 껐잖아. 인정을 해 안 해? 엄마 지금 내 자기 화에 휩쓸려서 인터넷 껐잖아. 인정을 해 안 해? 해 인정.
사방팔방.
Alrighty. Hey guys, welcome back to the Korean Always podcast. Today, of course, I'm with my boy George, and we're going to be talking all things output.
Yeah, so we've got a lot of topics we want to cover with you guys, and we're going to go through.
What did I just say? Wait a second.
Wait, cover
Let's
output.
pause. I just said output. What the? Dude, I went back an entire episode.
It's beginner mistakes, isn't it? Yeah.
That's a beginner mistake right there.
That was a
Sorry,
beginner
I'm
mistake right
I'm
there.
not going to count. Okay, sorry guys. Today we're going to be talking all things beginner mistakes. All right, George, what exactly are we going to talk about?
Yeah, so I'm just going to run you through the topics that we got going. So we're going to talk about ANKI, whether that get you fluent, if you're using it in the long term, like the right ways to use it. English subtitles, should you use them, shouldn't you use them? Questions that we want to mention. Overthinking the method as well. That's another very quite a big beginner mistake, if you will. And then we've also got some more, our own sort of archetypes of two types of beginners within Immersion, and we're going to discuss our thoughts based on that. So let's start off with will ANKI get me fluent? So Adamola, as a ex-ANKI user.
As an ANKI user,
what are you
calling me that?
Like how ANKI? Well, I'm calling you that, but I mean,
As an me? Oh, okay.
I mean, if you want to say, I mean, because I'm back on it. You know,
so,
I'm on the 500.
You know, let's talk for the top. So when we talk beginner mistakes, we're talking the things that we did in the past or things we've seen other people have done in the past on their journey that when they look back, they're like, dang, man, if I had only did it this way. So this list is comprised of basically most of the things we could think of. If you guys have thought of something that we didn't cover, let us know in the comments. But for the most part, this we thought was a pretty comprehensive topic list. And as George kind of brought us into this, ANKI. ANKI is something in this community, or in general, is very easy to, get in. It gets you right into learning the language. You start to build your understanding of words and the pre-made decks. And then we have the idea of self-made decks in Immersion. But the way I see ANKI, I'm like, okay, the way we should take ANKI is the same way as learning grammar and textbooks and studying other little topics of the language. Everything you study besides Immersion is towards the goal of improving your comprehensible input. You're trying to use ANKI to learn words that will help you be able to try and pick them up in your immersion. So if you take ANKI to the point where it's like, man, I have done like 12 hours of ANKI, you start flexing on Discord. It's a problem. What do you think about that, George?
The ANKI obsession. Yeah, no, I think it's perfectly
Have you seen anyone
normal
like that?
I mean, I have, but I mean, I'm part of that stereotype, I believe, but not 12 hours. Of course,
yeah?
But,
Okay.
There was a hardcore phase of ANKI, and I'm a very passionate user of ANKI, and I did fall off recently, but we'll get into that later. But ANKI itself, I think, is very good just for that beginning stage, like the first 1,000, 2,000 words. We've already mentioned this in our output episode, but that is the ideal sort of key time where Anki is almost a must. I mean, I can't say it's a must, but without it, it's going to be very hard.
But it's definitely
to progress
helpful.
quickly.
It's definitely helpful to kind of.
It's very
move
efficient.
things
It's very
forward.
efficient. So there's that, and then the obsession part of it. Then I did have that sort of obsession, feeling like only Anki's what's making me learn. Particularly once you get to, like, I don't know, say you're getting to the 5,000, 7,000 sort of card range, you're learning harder words, and all you know is Anki. Like, all you know is using Anki to get you, that's gotten you that far. So you feel like if you skip your reps or you don't add new cards through Anki, you can't learn them otherwise. And it's just the weird sort of illusion that happens in your brain where you're really trying to do the best for your immersion, but you overstress about your studying versus your actual input time. And that really does happen quite a lot. So yeah, do be cautious of that. The only way that you can cut back, I'd say, is maybe limit yourself to, say, 10 cards a day, or limit yourself time-wise, so you only want to spend an hour a day. And I would say you probably don't need to spend more than half an hour a day. If you're spending more than an hour a day on Anki, then perhaps it's best to look at, like, do you really need to be spending that time there? Could you be spending it somewhere else to progress more efficiently? Is my opinion on that.
I think that's a great turnaround, great way to kind of bundle it all together. Because the way I see Anki overall, it's like you kind of just have to take it for what it is, but don't let it dominate every single hour of your quote unquote study time. Because if you want to progress in the language, the number one thing you got to do is, guess what? Immersion. So I urge you guys, if you are spending time with Anki, a lot of time, maybe I don't know how many reps. I've heard of some people doing upwards of 3 to 4 hours of reps. Maybe that's not you guys, but if you guys are doing 30 minutes of Anki, at least try and bundle that with an hour of immersion. Don't just leave Anki. Oh, I did Anki, so I'm done for the day. You need to put in immersion to kind of see the progression kind of pull together, because the Anki is only helping you with your immersion. So if you don't do the immersion, you kind of
right. It's important to make that distinction. Yeah, the distinction between studying and actual sort of input. Actual learning.
Acquiring input,
there you go.
Acquiring the language. Acquisition and study. That's exactly what we're getting at. And that brings us to number two. Number two, this is going to be a controversial one, I believe, or at least...
I mean, we both probably have the
relatively.
Same thing. Yeah.
And that is...
English subtitles.
Yeah, I think we do.
English subtitles is our next topic. So, yeah, English subtitles, obviously...
Yeah.
Again, the beginning stages with Anki, you're probably going to be using English to Korean decks or Korean to English decks as you progress forward, and then you make the monolingual transition around sort of, I think it was 2,000. I think I did it 3,000 words. But
that's topic we're talking about.
We can get to that later on. But the whole English subtitles. Now, my personal view on English subtitles is the only time you ever want to use them is when a friend comes around and you would end up speaking to them in English anyway. But say there's a Korean program you're both going to watch. Then sure, you can turn on some English subtitles so your friend can enjoy the time you're immersing with them.
That's reasonable.
And it's pretty reasonable. You don't want to be a complete so obsessed with Korean that you.
Hey, I'm watching Korean, so you have to watch it in Korean.
Although I actually did that a few times. My dad actually, I watched something with my dad. And he was just like, oh yeah, whatever. If it's in Korean, I'll just watch it with you. He was totally cool about it. And then with my mum, it's completely the opposite. So I mean, it really depends on the person that you're.
If that happens, I'm chilling, watching some immersion on TV. I was watching High Kick, I think it was. And my parents, they didn't care. They literally just sat down. They were like, oh, just tell us what's happening. So literally, I think I spoke of this but this before. I was just translating the entire show for them. Every episode. They would sit down with me for hours. So if they don't complain, it doesn't hurt.
Exactly. It helps everyone out. So if you can get that situation, that's great. But English subtitles, only want to be using them in friendship. But you want to be using English subtitles in situations that would otherwise compromise your friendship if you didn't use them. To give a complete, definition.
Right. And I guess my take on English is I've always kind of said you start learning Korean once you kind of drop the English. Because for myself, before I was even had the thought of let me learn Korean, I did watch, I think it was Yongkook Namja. And Yongkook Namja just happens to have subtitles in both Korean and English. And honestly, that's the best option if you are still feeling like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. The best thing you could do if you really feel like English is what you need, then I recommend using double subtitles. Because that makes sure that you can actually see the Korean, practice your reading, but at the same time, if you're struggling, you can look at the English.
All about what makes you
consistency is most important.
Right? If you're feeling like you need the English subtitles, then yeah, doing the dual subtitle track is way better than just English.
Yeah, so overall, as long whatever kind of helps you to make sure that you're still watching Korean content, but eventually and sooner than later, eventually you're just gonna have to take that point where I'm gonna only use Korean. And for me, that was the first day I started immersing. And honestly, like a couple days before, I remember watching what was it called? The Bukan K-drama. 사랑이 불시착. That's it, that was it. I was watching that show, and dude, Crash Landing on You in English. I did not understand like
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
I mean, I can understand. That's frightening. Like not understanding anything. It's like,
and particularly that show, because I've had an experience with that show. Even when that was one of the first shows I watched when I decided, yeah, I'm gonna go and immerse in Korean now. And obviously, because it's all using like North Korean grammar points and stuff, all the stuff that I had learned,
yeah, true,
was like completely out the window. So that was like a real. If you guys really want to go hardcore, then I suggest you watch that as your first drama as well, because it really it puts you to the limit.
That reminds me of another tip, which is to watch content that in the beginning, watch content that will allow you, that is not so far off the walls. Kind of watching the content that you enjoy is, first of all, the most important thing. Enjoyment is number one. But then also, don't be watching like some random lectures when you literally just started learning Korean.
Yeah. But then
It's
also,
like all Korean,
you don't want to
talking
watch
like
kids
physics.
shows as
Don't
well.
do that
Because
to
kids
yourself.
shows is just going to be boring as hell for you. So it's finding that right balance.
You know,
Yeah.
there's one thing.
Oh, that
Depends on the
depends
person.
personally.
you are.
I
Like for
guess. I
me,
cannot
I
say that.
enjoyed watching. I enjoyed watching Jadu.
Really?
Like I don't know if you've watched Jadu before, but that stuff was hitting for me. So I'd put it on my TV and watch it. But for most people, that's
Yeah,
not
I've never
gonna
watched
work.
a kids show.
So you just gotta find what works for you, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
No,
never
not
watched a kids
Korean.
show?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's I
okay.
just
I might
yeah,
get
oh
you
god,
on.
you have me
He's a
immersed in
pig.
like. But yeah, for like example, say you watched Squid Game before, with English subtitles. Watching stuff again, which you've already watched with English subtitles, is really great because you can understand the story and then you just get the flow of things just because you already originally understood the story in the first watch. Doing second watch throughs of things, even if you've watched it firstly in Korean as well, is also a really great strategy for acquisition. So yeah, I could recommend that.
That is great. That's a great idea because that's what I did as well, and that really helped me. Like I could see every day I listened to the same thing, boom, boom, boom. I could just feel my understanding, or even before it was understanding, I could feel my ear was starting to say, "Oh, I can actually pick out the difference between sounds." And once you can try to just like take in those little bites every day, and you move forward each a little. If you take that and take enjoyment in those moments, then by the time like 2 years pass, you won't even know. You're just like, what the heck?
Yeah,
I'm actually pretty good.
It's all about that repetition. Yeah.
So yeah, just gotta take it
slow, repeat what you're doing, and try and avoid English subtitles as best as you can if you're trying to make real progress.
That's true.
So we've got a question.
That brings us to a question. You know, okay, George, do we have any regrets? That's one thing that's like during our past 2 years journey learning Korean, was there any point where you were like, dang, looking back, like, oh my gosh, I wish I didn't do that. I wish I had changed that. What was that for you?
I can't really say that I regret going too hardcore because, I mean, it got me to where I am now. But there are some times where I wish I took my health more seriously. Like, staying indoors, listening to the same podcast 24/7 and, like, just eating snacks while watching TV is probably not going to do anyone any good. Like, get your exercise, get your sleep before anything else. Generally, because if you don't have your mental health, then you're not going to be able to immerse anyway. So it actually does come into the whole efficiency of things. If you can't maintain your 12-hour a day, immersion streak, then it's really not worth pushing it for one day to do 12 hours and then burn out the next.
It's not worth it.
So that's why people do recommend saying start with an hour, go to 2 hours, build up slowly. Building up slowly is good. Also, just make sure you're keeping your health in check throughout the time. Especially this applies for people who are like learning languages like Korean or Japanese, for example, where there's a lot of media that is like very perhaps online based, like video games, for example. You want to be able to mix things up with like a podcast while you're outside, or mix things up that make sure you're getting your exercise, because health is literally number one in any aspect of life almost. I mean, okay, that's a bit preachy, but keep your health, guys, because you'll regret it.
No, dude. I 100%, every single thing you just said, health number one, that is actually my regret as well. Because during that period where I basically was peaking at some 22-hour immersion days, that period, I was compromising my sleep so much. I felt like I was kind of hurting myself in a
Yes.
way, which if I was to tell anyone, like there was a period before I like timed every single time I was going to immerse, and I made sure I slept at 12 o'clock and woke up at 8. So I always had an 8-hour
Wow, yeah.
period. But as time went on, those good habits that I had set in the beginning started to kind of break off. And if I had kept good sleep, I think sleep is one thing people
Certainly.
underestimate. It's extremely valuable towards your brain actually
Mm.
acquiring the language. If you feel like you're struggling and you're not sleeping,
And
that might
particularly
be a
mental health
problem.
as well.
So try
Like,
and get more sleep. Take it
for
easy.
if it's for a little, statistic for you, I think over like 60% of like depression patients are people who are just generally not sleeping well. Like you fix their sleep and their disease goes away. So definitely, even from someone who's had experience with sort of like not sleep therapy, sleep medications and this kind of thing, definitely do see your doctor if you feel like you've got insomnia or are just struggling to sleep, even when you try and do your sleep preparation things like setting a good bedtime and getting up at the right time. Definitely, get help if you do need it. Yeah.
Exactly. Hey man, who needs to go to a psychiatrist when you
Yeah,
have to pay
exactly.
for it,
Yeah. Don't have a degree, but we sure have the
this
best
is-
tips.
Don't have a degree, but we have something. Okay, so let's get on to the next thing on the list. Okay, this one is overthinking the
Right.
method. And when we say that, I mean like when you take, say, immersion is one way to go about learning the language, but in a way, it's kind of input is the most important thing. But immersion is just the way we
Yes.
phrase the method. And I find that certain individuals, when they overthink, like, oh, what am I supposed to do today? What am I supposed to do tomorrow? Oh my gosh. Oh man, when I'm fluent, what do I do? Oh man, when I'm fluent, I'll do this, that. You're overthinking everything that you're
It's
doing,
hard not
everything
to,
that's
yeah.
happening. Yeah,
It's hard not
it's
to when
hard
you're
not to.
passionate.
Yeah, with our passion, we love learning these languages. We're trying to get fluent, but in certain ways, we're hurting ourselves if we do too much of that. So we kind of need to just bring it down, and we kind of just need to, like, when you have a method, say you find out you want to learn, you have immersion, there's Memorize, there's Duolingo, there's this, that, and certain people will start picking things and trying them. Nothing wrong with trying things. The thing we want to focus on is time you spend doing all of that chasing for the best method, the best way to go. You will often waste more time than you could have been moving forward with one method that you were just putting the consistency. Right? So we kind of want to encourage you to, when you find a method, the most important thing you can do is compare it and see if the results that you saw what the person had is something you want. If the results that the person you see looks good and you're like, oh my God, I want to do that, then maybe you should look into doing what that person did.
So
and that's the way I think you should kind of take a method.
If I understood what you said correctly, then you're kind of suggesting that people should find one sort of more ideal method and then just stick with it for a while. Just stick with it so you don't overthink it. Because if you're overthinking what you should do, then you're not going to do anything.
Exactly.
That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Right. I'm totally on board with that idea as well. And yeah, I would say following... Although another sort of small beginner mistake that could happen is you could compare yourself to, say, for example, let's say Stevie, another guy in the community. My personal experience, I thought seeing him doing his tracking of his hours, I thought that was like really amazing. And I thought, well, that'll work for me because, Stevie's doing it. I can do it. Why not? But for me personally, the numbers stressed me out. So choosing that method and sticking to that method wouldn't have been a good idea. So there is an element of trial and error, but once you find something that you like for, say, a week, a few days, then you want to stick to it because you can trial and error things and you'll probably figure out if it doesn't work for you in a few days period. So the definitive answer for this problem is pick a method, try it for a few days. If you like it within 3 days, stick with it. If not, then find something else. That is how you sort of overcome the problem, in my opinion. Doesn't really get much simpler than
and
that,
honestly, I feel like you could take that same approach and apply that to almost anything we do, such as if you find a YouTube channel and you're like, oh, I wonder what's the kind of media for me? What's the kind of stuff that I can just like watch for hours and hours? Try watching a channel. If you find a channel like, oh, this is interesting, try watching some of their videos. And if you just so happen to enjoy watching them, stick with it until eventually, if you're like, oh, I'm kind of bored, then move on with a new channel and maybe come back later. Maybe you'll feel better about it. But overall, I think that's a great way to go about it. Overthinking the method, though, that we basically talked a little bit, pretty deep about that. And I guess the one last thing that we kind of wanted to enter was the idea of when we're talking about mistakes, there are mistakes that individuals that are beginners, traditional learners that are in textbooks, classes, those kinds of learners that make, which are different from the mistakes that immersion learners make. And we kind of wanted to detail kind of, since most of our viewers are immersion learners, the kind of mistakes that we think will be the most beneficial for you guys to hear. So you guys can take that on your journey and try and implement these things, or at least not implement the mistakes, implement the benefits.
Implement the corrections.
Mistakes. Oh, sorry about that. So you guys can move forward like that. And George, did you have anything to say about that specifically?
So I mean, obviously I've been doing traditional learning in school with Spanish. Mistakes that, one mistake that I could think of is definitely trying to output when you don't really know what you're doing. Again, not that early output is bad per se. If you want to find out more about that, then you've got a link to our output episode. Go check that out. But got plenty. But yeah, no. Speaking without a solid knowledge of the language is something that schools will force you to do, and it's really just, rather than a mistake, it's just kind of a bad practice. But I personally agree with. And sure, there's nothing wrong with early output, but really, really early output, I mean, there's really no benefit. So again, we've discussed this topic before, so I don't want to get too much into that. Another mistake is with grammar tables as well. A lot of people stress a lot about grammar. Not that I've got anything against grammar guides. Grammar guides can be useful, but I mean, reading them through once is probably more than enough for the immersion learners. But for traditional learners, a lot of people spend lots and lots of time with grammar drills rather than perhaps reading through the textbook or reading through something that might improve their skill level, which I think is just a big mistake. Being afraid of the real content is really what's the biggest sort of hurdle, right? Because the traditional method is about skill building. You build up your skill and then you can approach the real native content. But obviously we know that's not how it works. You can't just read a book about skateboarding and then jump on the skateboard. You have to jump on the skateboard to learn it, right? And it's the same with immersion. You have to practice
exactly.
understanding stuff you don't understand. So the final verdict on that is just don't let your fear control you, or don't let your fear stop you from pursuing what you really need to pursue, which is looking at stuff you don't understand and trying to push through the barriers of not understanding. What about you, Adam? Do you have any?
That hit me.
Oh yeah.
I felt what you just said just now. And what I can say is, if you see a word, you don't know it, guess what? Like the way I went about it. So after I got my ears warmed up, listened to the language, and then I started using subtitles, and I'd look at the subtitles as I listen. Or if I turn off the subtitles and I just listen, I was like, what is that word? I'd question myself, what is that word? And if I saw it and I didn't understand, quick copy, throw in Naver, learn the meaning. Boom. Now I own that word now. I'm like, dude, I see that word again. I can hear it. I can understand it. And even if you don't, it's going to put you one step closer to understanding it fully. So why not just look it up? I don't like looking up like 1,000 things at a time. I just take it in one step at a time. If I see one word in a sentence that's stopping me from understanding, do that. And it'll put you another step forward. Every time you do a lookup is one step closer to fluency. So just do your lookups.
You're telling me, do your lookups. Wow. Because here's a little down. Do you think that you necessarily, if you didn't look that up, because in my personal opinion, you have to sort of weigh out the pros and cons. Like if it's really, really annoying, then don't bother looking it up is my advice. But then obviously, like you say, if it's like for the sake of like 2 seconds, you could just quickly look it up, then I would say looking it up probably does make things more efficient. But it's not like you have to look up every single word, because when you're in the beginning, there's like a million words you don't know. Don't misunderstand. So get I+1.
Most important.
If you find your I+1s,
that's
then
the key. Most definitely. I+1 sentences. Learn them once. You got a sentence. I don't know this word. Boom. It's asking you to look it up.
And linking back to the ANKI situation, again, I+1s obviously integrated with ANKI. Don't stress about this whole process too much. Again, so just running through. So using ANKI too much and relying or believing that ANKI is going to take you to fluency is obviously not the thing. So do not rely too much on ANKI. And if you've done your 30 minutes a day, you've probably done enough. English subtitles, don't let them be the barrier to you and your actual target language. Try your best to have the attitude where you can make it fun enough to enjoy the content without English subtitles. That is absolutely key. Don't overthink the method. The method itself can be complicated at times, so the best way to overcome this is to trial and error different methods that you like from other people, and if there's something that works for a few days, then stick with it.
What I'd like to say, when we say method, I don't necessarily mean we don't necessarily mean like, study with a textbook. Like what I mean is the way I immerse, the content I watch, the things I do every day is my method. The way George does his things, what he does every day, is his method. And we have two different ways about going about it. But in the end, we all are doing immersion, and we are all engaging with the media, which we know input is the number one most important thing in acquisition. So let that be known that we're not saying like, do textbooks, do grammar only, and then do that. Yeah, we're getting about that.
Oh yeah, this textbook, that, but yes, that's a good point. Yeah, we're not comparing products of, Duolingo, Pimsleur, different apps and things like that. We're comparing your method of engagement, how you choose to engage with content throughout your day.
사방팔방.
Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in to this episode about beginner mistakes. We discussed all the things that we want to do. If there's anything that you thought we left out, then do feel free to leave a comment for us, and we'll try our best to respond to it. If you want the best, fastest way of contacting us, feel free to join our Discord. We'll link that in the description as well. And Adamola,
do join. You must join. You must join the Discord, boys. Please join. You will never reach. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. And please like, subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Let us know if there's anything you want to see us do next week. And,
thank you very much, guys.
we'll see you then. Bye, guys.
Woo!